Guys, welcome to this episode of the Unemployables podcast. Today we've got one of Dan's buddies, Nicholls, coming in. He lives in Switzerland. He's currently working on an online course called Sales for Founders, which is huge for anyone founding a business. Sales is one of the most, if not the most important things you can learn how to do. So without further ado, let's kick off into it.
Become unemployable.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Unemployables podcast. Today, we are joined by Nicholls, who is joining us from Switzerland at the moment. So if fireworks start popping off, it's because it's a holiday over there. But Louis, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out of your day to do this podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why a guy from the UK is in Switzerland, and what you've been working on the last few years.
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be on the podcast and talk to you guys. The fireworks, it's a national day. It's not just something I organize for podcast appearances, although it's a great
It'd be
idea.
pretty sweet if you did.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. Sure. So how did I end up in Switzerland? Well, I'm running a course called Sales for Founders, which, like it says in the name, teaches founders, mainly technical founders, how to do sales. And that came out of a couple of companies that I've started previously. And the very first one of those, I started with a friend from university. And I went to university in Switzerland. So the company was started in Switzerland. How I ended up in Switzerland, I don't really know. My parents moved here. I came here for a week to say hi and ended up still being here 10 years later. So it's
hang on. When you came for that week, did you go back and then go back, or did you just stay?
Oh, well, that was like the third time I'd been here. And I came for a week. No, so I came for a week, and I realized I wanted to learn German, didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life. So I thought, well, why not stick around here, get a job? Ended up going to university here for a semester initially just to learn German, and then stayed, didn't want to leave, and then found it very difficult. It's a very comfortable place. It's a very difficult place to leave.
I've heard a lot of amazing things about Switzerland. Really good food and beautiful views. I mean, what more you don't need a lot more than that, right?
It is really an amazing place. It's the quality of life is ridiculously high.
Yeah.
Salaries are really good, and it's right in the middle of Europe. So you have really good airports nearby, and you can get to pretty much anywhere within an hour and a half. So
and they don't stick their foot in everyone else's diplomatic business around the world.
No, they have their finger in a lot of pies, but they're happy.
They're not picking fights like other unnamed countries.
No.
That's cool. So, have you had a typical 9-to-5 job, like an office desk type job, or have you always kind of started things from scratch?
Sure. So thinking back to, I've had 2 internships which were pretty 9-to-5, and which I absolutely hated, and which are the reason that I even started to think about becoming a founder or an entrepreneur. And I've had a full-time job working in a bar while I was kind of financing one of my companies. And the only time that I've really been kind of 9-to-5 normally employed was kind of as a VP for 8 or 9 months at a VC-backed startup. So it wasn't a normal 9-to-5, but it was, I got a wage.
Why did you hate your internships?
So I think maybe I need to go back a bit for that.
Sure.
So, all the way through high school, I really wanted to be a professional swimmer.
Okay.
And that was what I was going to be, and I didn't think about anything else. And then, all of a sudden, I was, 18, not going to be a professional swimmer. So I needed to find something else to do. And what you go and study when you have no idea what you want to do, you go and study business, because you can kind of do everything with that, but also nothing.
Yep.
So I went to business kind of in Europe. You can do an undergrad in like a business undergrad, um, and everyone who was doing that wanted to go into consulting or banking. So I thought, well, if everyone here wants to do that, then that's probably what I should be doing as well. So I did an internship in consulting, an internship in banking. Absolutely hated it and needed to find something else. Yeah.
Did you hate the work or the environment or the people? All three?
I uh, I no, the people were okay. The environment was very comfortable. It
Mhm.
was really the work. It was the lack of responsibility
Mm.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the amount of you get a chance to look at like the amount of infighting happening and the politicking and all that kind of stuff. And I just
Yup.
thought, I do not want to be here even for one more minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a couple internships. I went into project management or construction management, and I had a couple internships in that field. And I didn't realize how much I hated it because they were each 3 months long, like in the summer. And I didn't like process at the time that the reason I was getting through it was because I knew it was only a couple months until I got my day job doing exactly that. And I was like, in the first week, I was like, oh, fuck, this isn't 3 months. This is 40 years. Like, I got to get the
Yeah.
fuck out of here. But I'd imagine it was the same thing.
For sure, yeah. No, in my head, I have no problem doing hard work and even repetitive work if it needs to happen, but
Yeah.
not for 40 years.
Not for 40
Yeah.
years and not for someone else. Like
Yeah, exactly.
if I'm gonna do things that I don't like, it needs to be for a direct or even indirect, but
Exactly.
like a result for me, not for them.
Yeah.
So can you kind of paint me a timeline of the jobs you've had? Like you went, what happened after the internship? Is that when you went to the venture back startup, or did you start you said you were working full time at a bar. Can you kind of paint the arc of your career so far so I know kind of where things lay? Because I know you've done Jim Hopper and Post Perk and you're doing sales for founders now, but I'd like to kind of have a timeline so I know where I'm talking about when I ask questions.
Right, yeah. So this bit's impossible, and we're never going to get this down because do you guys know Josh Pickford? He runs Barometrics, and he has the same problem that I have, even worse than I have, which is he's done about 100 different projects at this point. So I'm not quite at that level, but still it's enough to be confusing. So
Yeah.
I'll try and go through. So at college, I was doing these two internships, and out of one of those internships, I basically really liked my manager, but really hated the job. And my manager needed someone to come and do. They were doing a startup on the side. They didn't want to be there any longer either, and they needed someone to help them out with marketing. So I thought, well, it can't be any worse than this. Let's kind of keep the same boss, swap jobs, and do it like a marketing internship, basically, with just the two founders at their house. And at the same time, I set up a small e-commerce business, which went reasonably well actually for a couple of years. And that was pretty much all I did until, as I was finishing college, I started my own company with a friend, which is called Jim Hopper, which we took a small bit of money for that, ran it for I was there for about 3 years. And then I left, and then about after 5 years in total, 4 or 5 years, we sold it.
That's great.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, we sold it to a competitor, and then from there, I basically moved straight into consulting. Tried a small business on the side, which worked well, and then I was kind of hired into doing this this like full-time job, basically the the main job that I was working on for 9 months at this VC-backed startup called Ivrios. It's not well known, but
Okay.
it was doing pretty well. And out of that, I started a company with a couple of friends called Postperk. And now, after 9 months, I left that, and I'm now running this Sales for Founders course. That's basically a kind of a short
General.
version of the
Great.
thing. Yeah.
Where does the bar fit in? What were you doing there?
Right. So the bar was something while I was at university, I was kind of just working there on nights and weekends anyway,
Yeah.
maybe like 2-3 nights a week. And then there was this point where kind of after the exams in summer, I had like 3 or 4 months where we decided we were going to try and make Gym Upper work. and we weren't making any money from it. So I was basically working full time during the day, during the evenings even at this bar, and then kind of on the side nights and weekends. Although in my case it was days and not
Right.
weekends because bar work is nights and weekends.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I was working on that.
You
Kind of
were
from,
bartending.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Man, I spent a year in college bartending, and it was my favorite job I ever had.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I
Oh
loved
my
it.
god, that's part of the reason I'm doing like this and Ground Shark and all of that. It's like if I get to the point where I can kind of pick the work I want, I would take a part-time bartending job in an absolute heartbeat. I loved it.
For sure. Yeah, and I still think sometimes it'd be quite nice just once a month just to go and do a shift somewhere
I've
on
kind of
like a
been
Friday
thinking
night.
that. I've been thinking that too, you know. But then you give up a little bit a degree of freedom there, so
Yeah.
give or take. But I will say I think bartending, and maybe you feel the same way, was like one of those things that was almost instrumental to me in like learning sales and learning how to talk to people and all of that. I don't think I'd be where I was without that job, even though it was kind of seen as like a job just to get through college.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to. I mean, you're in constant contact with customers,
Mm-hmm.
and no matter how you feel, like how your day is going, what's going on, you have to be friendly. You have to be kind of available and welcoming, and just open and talk to people.
Yeah,
And I think that's really useful. I think I always notice kind of. I think it's really important that everybody, at least at some point in their life, does do a service job, whether that's bartending or working as a waiter or waitress,
totally.
working in a clothes store, something like
Yep.
that. I think it does help you a lot for sure.
Yeah. It
And
teaches you how to not treat other people, especially people in
yeah,
jobs.
I will say too, like you talk to a cross section of people that you would never normally talk to.
Yeah,
Retail is one thing, but bartending's a totally other thing because it's like, man, everyone gets drunk. Like,
yeah,
you talk to some weird people, but it's cool because it teaches you to talk to those people and actually communicate and connect with them in a way
yeah,
that
for
jobs
sure.
don't.
So in kind of looking at this timeline of all of the work that you've done, it's interesting because it feels you've hopped around quite a bit, right? What do you
Yeah.
what do you think it was about Jim Hopper that made you stay so much longer there? Because it seems like that was where your longest stint was, right? You were there for a few
Yes.
years, whereas all these others, it was essentially could be measured in months. Why did you stay with Jim Hopper so much longer than the others? What kind of set that apart for you?
Well, I mean, that was my baby. We raised some money, we built a team, and I had plans to stay there for a long time. And I think the only reason I ended up leaving was because my co-founder and I, we kind of, well, first of all, we had this pressure of wanting to raise a big round and that just falling through at the very last minute, and us
Mm,
having already scaled the team in preparation for that, so we needed to make cutbacks anyway. And I had, I think, done a pretty good job of replacing myself in pretty much every role in preparation for that. So when I was looking and saying, okay, well, do we get rid of our kind of head of marketing? Well, no, he's better at marketing than I am. Do we get rid of our country manager for this country? No, she's better than me at that. Um, Developers, definitely not. They're way better than me at coding. So, well, I'm the obvious weak link here. And I think you get to this point a couple of years down the road, if you do have a co-founder, where often, even though you're totally aligned at the beginning and you're still getting along really well, you start wanting you have slightly different visions for the business, where it's going to end up.
yeah.
And that doesn't really tend to go away. One of you'll always want to go in one direction and the other will want to go in the other direction.
Mm,
Um, and I think at the time it would have been more difficult to replace my co-founder than it would have been to replace me, simply because he was kind of very on the sales side in our main market. He was very active there. Um, and it was just kind of the right decision to say, well, honestly, I'm the kind of the best person to leave right now. That would open up a bit
Wow.
more equity to kind of give us a bit more time and stuff. And I mean, I still, until we sold, I was still obviously a shareholder and
yeah.
still on the board and stuff, but yeah, not involved in the day to day.
It's a hard decision, and
Yeah.
it sounds like you approached it with a very humble attitude. Because I think there are a lot of people who, when they had invested everything into starting their own company, that's their baby, would not go out without a big fight in that similar situation.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if we had just been the two of us, maybe plus the investors, I would have put up
Sure.
a real fight. I
Right.
think when you have employees, and there's something I really don't like having employees, especially when I'm the one who's
Mhm.
hired responsible. We had two
Yeah,
or three people who moved countries for us, and
Wow.
moved their family and moved them, and you think, well, really, I can't be responsible for them having moved 2 months ago and having to leave. Like their job's way more important than kind of what I want to see from the company. So
that's
it was, yeah.
that is incredibly mature. It's like
Yeah.
it's like holy
Yeah.
shit. Um,
I think we've had conversations with people on this podcast who wouldn't do that. So that's
Ooh,
really impressive to me that you were able to not only replace yourself, but kind of pull back and have enough perspective to say, okay, it's time for me to bow out. That's cool.
so I was wondering, did you have like an exit strategy from the start? Like you talk about you and your co-founder having different plans for the business long term. Me and my co-founder absolutely do with Ground Shark Coffee. Um, there's things I want to do, and there's things that he wants to do that don't really line up, and that's okay. Part of the reason that's okay is because we have an exit strategy and we have a plan because he wants to get out of the business in a couple of years once he's got enough money. Did you have something similar?
No, not really. So we can actually get into this with post perk as well, because that's a really interesting parallel, where it was completely different. But for Gym Hopper, we were both on board for 10 years, and we both wanted to build the same company pretty
Okay.
much. We
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to get there in different ways.
Pretty
Uh,
much.
so I,
Yeah.
yeah. So my thought was when we had paying customers, right? We had hundreds of paying customers, tens of thousands of dollars of monthly revenue. And we could either double down and say, okay, we have a product that works and we can just about sell it. So let's sell it to as many people as possible and put our focus there. Or you can say, we have this product that kind of works, but there's a lot more opportunity there with our current customers. Let's kind of build something that we know that they want, that they're willing to pay more for, and get a real foothold there, be the best at that, and then scale that up later with some more money. And I wanted to go down the second route. My co-founder wanted to go down the first route. And the investors were kind of more interested in the first route as well. So that's the way kind of it seemed to be going. And at that point, I kind of I lost interest slightly as well, I think. So that's
No,
kind of how
definitely.
that came to happen. Interestingly, with PostPerk, which is the last company I started, we had an exit strategy from the very beginning. I actually brought two people on board right after I started it, so they were co-founders as well, basically, and we were all very clear about the fact that we really wanted to get this thing to profitability, to about say around about the $10,000 MRR mark, and then to sell it. We didn't want to do this long term. We didn't really enjoy it necessarily. We just saw an opportunity. We wanted to build it as fast as possible and then sell it.
Yeah.
And then I think at about the point that we were about 6 months in, it looked like that kind of goal was pretty close. And my co-founders decided actually they really enjoyed doing that and they'd like to carry on working on it. And I still thought, well, look, I didn't really enjoy this on day one. I don't really enjoy it anymore now. So you guys carry on. You can buy me out, and let's do it that way instead.
Nice. I
Yeah.
think it's I think it's very telling that like that's a lesson you probably learned from the first business, right? Like you didn't have the exit strategy, and then on the second one you did. And it doesn't always have to come through exactly how you planned it, right? Like with Post Perks, they started liking it, you still didn't. So it's like, but you were upfront from the start, like I'm gonna sell this, whether to you guys or someone else, I'm gonna sell it, and that's huge because that's also been a big thing for my company, um,
Mm-hmm.
with stuff because when we have difference in philosophy or what we think we should do on my end, it's like, well, can we get to where we want to be going his route? And then when he sells it to me, can I make the decision to change then? It's like, yeah, all right, cool. We'll just do this then. No worries, you know?
Yeah, I think two really important things there that I've learned are just, on the one hand, to have, like, if you can have an odd number of co-founders, makes it much easier.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. You need that vote.
One is a great number of co-founders.
Yeah, one or yeah.
Founder.
Sure, I enjoy that as well. Yeah, and the other thing is just to have it really clearly mapped out at the beginning. I think a lot of people, they kind of they tiptoe around things and say, "Well, we'll work that out when it gets there." Just get it down in black and white on paper at the very beginning. How are you going to make those decisions? What's going to happen in the case of someone leaving? In the case of someone being pushed out? And then you have it black and white. And then because you'll 9 months down the line, 3 years down the line, you might not remember things the same way. But if you've written it down black and white, then there's no arguing really.
Yeah, dude. And I had a buddy ask me, or like kind of a mentor of mine, asked me the other day. Just called me up and he goes, "Hey, got a business question for you." Like, yeah. And Adam is my co-founder. He goes, "What would you do if Adam died tomorrow? What would the business do?" And I was like, "I've actually thought of that. Like, we'd be okay." And that's something a lot of people don't think about, right? Like, you don't like what if? You never know. Like, are you still gonna be okay? Can you still pay your bills?
Yeah, it's a real. I don't know how quickly you can. I mean, I never really thought about that in the first couple of months, but definitely 6 months. Yeah, when you actually have a business that's making money, yeah, for sure, that's something that you need to think about.
I've also heard it said that like the best way to like when you're like interviewing people, they always say like the beer test, right? Like, can you get a beer with that person and actually
Mm-hmm.
enjoy your time? But I think when you're co-founding, someone said like, do you trust your co-founder to take care of your family if you die? Like, do you trust that they'll do the right thing and actually make sure your family's still like okay? And that's a big one to me. It's like, will this person take care of what I need, like what I need him to if I'm gone? And I think that's big. It's a very big decision to go in on a company with someone else.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are. I haven't heard the beer test. I've heard like the long haul flight test, which is basically the same thing, right? Would you sit next to someone on a long haul flight?
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a really good proxy for that. And also, just something I like to do is to get into a not a fight, but a disagreement, an argument as soon as possible.
That's
Because that I think that's where you really see, right? If you're everything's fine when everything's still fine, right? But how you handle kind of a disagreement together.
just kill that honeymoon phase right out the
Pick
gate.
a fight.
Yeah. Pick something stupid to fight him.
Exactly.
No, that is a really good point. I didn't even think of that because my partner and I got into a fight pretty quickly on, like pretty early on. We got into a pretty big argument. Once we settled that, everything's been kind of cool since. But that's
Yeah.
a good point.
So, Louis, do you feel like it's been obvious going from job to job what's next? Like when you went from the internship to e-commerce to gym hopper, do you feel like there's been a natural progression from job to job to job and that it's been obvious, or do you feel like you just kind of fall into what's next? Like it just kind of comes to you?
I don't know. So there was at one point, I knew when I was doing the marketing internship, I knew I wanted to found a company, and at that point, I really wanted to found a really big kind of unicorn style company. When that didn't quite work with Gym Hopper, I kind of knew the next step would at some point be to go and kind of learn what I did wrong, because we got to that point really fine and everything felt good, but we just couldn't at the last minute just quite get the investors over the line, like serious VC money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really thought, well, what I need to do is go and kind of be on the inside somewhere where they do know what they're doing, where they've managed this. So this opportunity came along. A founder of this company reached out to me and said, "Look, we've just taken on a real big amount of money. We need someone to lead up kind of channel sales and partnerships, and you can kind of be on the inside, and I'll let you be inside in most of the investor meetings, a lot of the board stuff, all that kind of stuff. See how it's happening." So I said, "Yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for." That kind of really showed me that I didn't want to run a VC-backed company at all pretty quickly. So I lasted, like in my head, I lasted about 9 days there, but I actually ended up being there for about 9 months. Just because I think when you commit to something, you have to kind of try and do your best. Right. Yeah, and after that, I had another kind of period of like being really disillusioned where I knew I've wanted to build this VC-backed company, and I've now realized I really don't want to do that. And that's when I discovered that was right when Cortland Allen was kind of launching Indie Hackers, or the community part of Indie Hackers. So I was I think one of the first people who signed up there to the community. I don't know if you guys know Indie Hackers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah. And that was kind of all of a sudden, it was people who, were bootstrapping, were trying to build their own businesses without VC backing. It seemed like a lot of people who were making the same mistakes that I just made. And yeah, that kind of gave me this second impetus of wanting to build my own thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ryan, who we did the productivity challenge with, has been pretty influential in my trajectory of kind of going from VC money's cool to it's the devil and bootstrap and do your own thing. Because I kind of got to watch, and he and I, so we went to middle school together. So he and I go way back, and have known each other for a long time and just stayed in touch. And when he moved to San Francisco and was out in that world and experiencing it, and I was getting to hear about some of that, I was just like, what a just big old shit fire that is. Because, taking on VC money is taking on another co-founder, more or less, and sometimes to a disproportionate extent. So I think it's really cool that you have hopped around a little bit, but it seems like it's been very deliberate, excuse me. And that each step of the process for you has been a very significant learning experience that you're carrying over into whatever the next thing is, right?
Maybe that's fair to say, yeah, I guess. I've
Well,
never really thought about it like that, yeah.
That's what that's how it kind of comes across to me. Like you went to the internship thing and you're like, oh, hell no, I cannot do this. And then you started Gym Hopper and you got to create this baby, and you had the experience of the VC money not coming through and then having to bow out. Like, that's an incredibly difficult process to go through at a young age and not having a ton of experience under your belt. And then to go from that to Avrios, where you spend 9 months because you're like, oh, let's see what this VC money world looks like. And you're like, oh shit, this isn't good either. Like, despite the fact that they haven't worked out how you planned or hoped, those are still invaluable experiences in it, because you're seeing, okay, here's what I don't want to repeat. Here are experiences that I know how to avoid. I've seen the signs and I've been through them firsthand. So I know, with this next thing, that I'm not going to go that same route, and I'm going to try something new and try and do that a little bit better than I've done anything else. And that's the narrative that's coming out to me anyway. It may not be how you see it, but to me, that's the value of it. From my perspective.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, maybe hindsight's 2020. So yeah,
right.
Yeah, at the time, you're like, this sucks, but
right. That's like, I went to work for a small startup, and really loved the small team that I worked with. The founder brought me on to do marketing. They'd never hired a marketing person before. And was like, hey, I really want to take this from a lifestyle business to let's get to 7 figures, because they weren't there yet. And within a few months, I was like, oh no, he thought that's what he wanted. That's not actually what he wanted. His actions would hamstring any effort to get past the lifestyle business. Like, he had built a really comfortable business where he was the expert, he was the guru, and he was making great money for his family to live the life that they were comfortable with. And to go beyond that was going to take an incredible level of discomfort, and he wasn't ready for that. And so I was like, well, that's not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to prop up your lifestyle business and keep me down on the ladder. Like, I want to build and climb. So I left, and turns out things were not as they seemed. And there were financial issues that were hidden from the team that were pretty significant. And it's just like, that was a learning experience for me to trust my gut. And I had that same thing happen in this last 9-to-5 job I was in, where it was like things shifted. They were good for a little while. I got to go through an acquisition by a Fortune 300 company, see that world that I've never seen before. And then something shifted. In my gut, I told my wife, something's not right. something changed, and it's like the end is coming for me. And
Mm-hmm.
within 3-4 months of me saying that, it happened. Um, so it's every step. It's been important for me after the fact to go back and kind of, I don't know if doing an autopsy is the right word, but basically dissect like what happened. What were the indicators I might have missed? What did I catch on to that I should have hardcore listened to, and then taken that into my next thing? Like, I can't just coast by and say, "Oh, that didn't work out. I wonder what that's about." Like, I really had to go back and do some dissection and figure out, okay, what did I learn? What was a negative experience? What do I not want to repeat? And then how can I move forward into whatever's next? And that's been really, really valuable for me in the last few years. So, what are you doing right now with Sales for Founders? That's a course. Is that what you said? It's not a consulting thing. It's a course. Is that right?
Yeah. So at the moment I basically do two things, and Sales for Founders is the main one, which I guess let's start with the consulting, actually, because
Sure.
that explains where Sales for Founders came from.
Great.
So something I really like doing is marketing consulting, and I've been doing that kind of, in between when you have to pay the bills, and also just, I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I'm at right now.
Started off more as a freelancer, which is not a great kind of way to position yourself. Then more of a generalist consultant, which is also not a great way to position yourself if you want to make some good money. And I ended up basically being a specialist. So I do social proof consulting. But most of what I actually do, I mean, I don't really do any outreach. I have like 1 or 2 clients come in a month, kind of inbound. And I don't really do very much social proof consulting. It tends to be they need something else instead, but they hire me for that, and then we go through and see what they're doing wrong, and we find something that we can kind of help them with this that they need to do before they can do the social proof stuff. Anyway, so what I wanted to do, I like the consulting, but I mean, you know what it's like. You have kind of 3 people who want to book you 1 week and then nothing for the next month, and it doesn't scale very well. So I wanted to kind of turn the framework that I had that I thought was really, really useful, and I hadn't seen anyone else do anything even close to that. I wanted to turn that into a book at first. And the problem with the book is that you can't charge a lot of money for a book. So I couldn't charge kind of the value of the book. So I needed to turn it into a course. And I'd never run a course before, never done videos, all that kind of stuff, no idea how to do it. So I thought, well, I don't want to this is my big thing. This is my, my baby that I think is going to be really, really important. Put me on the map as the social proof guy, kind of. And I don't want to mess this up. So why don't I try and do a course first on something else that people keep asking me about? I get a couple of emails every day from my newsletter with people asking me how to do sales and how to kind of get their first customers and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, I know how to do that inside out. I've been helping people do that kind of for free on my own time, an hour a day anyway. Why don't I make a course out of that, where I know the content like the back of my hand, and then once that's done, I can go and do the social proof thing properly. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've been running this Sales for Founders course since April. So in April, I did a really quick launch. Literally, I reached out to my newsletter list and said, this is all going to be live. I'm going to do this over the next 3 weeks. It's going to be, I think I said it's going to be $300. There are 7 spots available, first come, first served. And that sold out in about 17 minutes. So I was like, well, okay, I've got to do this. So yeah, so I did that, and then I did that was all completely live, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of group lessons over Zoom. Then about a month later, I said, okay, well, let's try and do this more hands-off. So I had some video lessons I recorded, and a bit of one-on-one stuff as well. And I put up a real landing page for that. Did a bit more, not a lot of promo, but I spent 2 weeks trying to get some people in there. That went pretty well as well. And now that cohort's finishing, and I'm now going to do an evergreen version, launching the end of August, beginning of September.
Gotcha. That's great. So this is pretty new for you then.
Yeah, this is completely new for me. It's three months. Yeah.
And it's your first ever online course, right?
My complete first, yeah,
Yeah,
I've taken
that's
a
cool.
couple of online courses,
Right.
mainly coding stuff,
Yeah,
but yes, the first time doing it, yeah,
that's
and
cool.
it's
Did you see Ryan's breakdown post this morning that he sent
I
out?
haven't read it yet.
It's, I mean, it's crazy. So our friend Ryan Nick, for context,
Yeah.
he's bought and sold a bunch of small, really small businesses, and so he was like, "Hey, maybe I could turn this into a course." And he did, and the first 24 hours, he did 10,000 in sales for the course.
Mhm.
Wow. That's
And so,
awesome. I
uh,
would love to have a
bef-
$10,000 day. That'd be so
before
cool.
the course, so the course officially launched today. And so in about basically 2 weeks, though, he did 20,000 in sales for
Yeah.
it. And it's just, I mean, there's a lot of fortuitous circumstances around it. Like he had the right
Oh yeah.
people retweet it at the right time.
Mhm.
Well, and
So,
he's done all
well,
the work, right?
yeah,
His
yeah. And I mean, he shot the course over like the last week or something. Uh,
Mhm.
but
awesome.
it's just fascinating to see. And this is like his third or fourth. And I feel like each one he does is getting better, which is, I think, part of the cool thing of doing anything like that more than one time. Like the more you do it, the better you're going to get. So it's cool to see that you're about to launch the evergreen version. Are you going to set up like a funnel of any sort, and like a try and automate a funnel for it?
Yeah, so I actually have so I can the main difference is up until now uh, it's been basically like a one ticket item. So you buy in and you get the videos and the examples, the templates, all that kind of stuff, the worksheets. But you also get access to the community. You also get access to this accountability tool that I've built, and you get one-on-one sessions. That's like the way the current version worked, and it
Mm-hmm.
was pretty simple. It was just under $2,000 to take part. So I did about the same revenue as Ryan, but completely differently because his course was like $150 or
Right,
something.
right,
Mine was like 2,000, right? Which worked really well for me because I had a pretty cool onboarding sequence, like a sales funnel, and it worked really, really well. But I didn't
that's
get
great.
many people in at the top of the funnel, so I had like almost a 10% conversion rate on a
Wow,
almost $2,000 ticket. Um,
awesome.
but yeah, I mean, I only had it open for 2 weeks and didn't really do a lot of promo on it.
Right,
I didn't want it to be too big, to be honest, because I couldn't handle all the one-on-one stuff, and also,
Right.
yeah,
yeah. So this version is going to be slightly different. I'm going to have like a do-it-yourself version, which is just the videos, the templates, the lessons. No hand holding from me, no access to the course, the group, and that kind of stuff. And then I'm probably only going to have one other segment, which is going to be basically everything. So it's either take away this. It's going to be under $100. Just take away the course, the lessons, read them in your own time, use it however you want. It's helpful. Um, or you can kind of go all in and say, look, I'm building a business now. I need to make sales now. I want someone to help me, and I want someone to kind of make sure I do get there. And that's going to be more expensive with the one-on-ones. That's going to be closer to the $1,500.
Right.
So yeah, I have like a sales funnel that works really well already. The only
that's great.
difficult thing is just to get it in front of more people,
Right.
basically.
That's always
What
the hard part, man.
Yeah.
what have been some of the best resources for you in learning as you've started doing this online course stuff?
Sure. So I think honestly, just looking at how other people are doing their online courses.
Yeah.
So when I think, and I'm very careful not to kind of go too deep into the specifics of like people's emails and stuff, because then I'll just end up copying them. And
Right.
obviously everyone's audience is completely different, right? So you don't want to think, oh, because this works for them, it's going to work for me. So I really don't copy people's emails. You have to understand kind of why they're doing what they're doing.
It's
But
a
what
good
I've seen
approach.
work, like my favorite resources have probably been Brennan Dunn, kind of his W freelancing stuff. Obviously, the way he sends emails, the way he sets up that whole course stuff is just amazing.
Yeah.
He's like the master of that. Um, then there's a woman called Janelle Allen who runs a podcast, and also I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but she basically runs a course on how to run courses, and also a podcast talking to people about how they run courses, and that's been really useful. I didn't take the course, but I listened to her podcasts, and they were really good.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, and I think those are the kind of my main inspirations for that.
Yeah.
To be honest, yeah.
We did a podcast earlier this year with a guy named Jacques, who,
Oh yeah, forgot about Jock.
he's the piano in 21 Days guy. So
Yeah.
have you heard of it?
Yeah. Maybe I even heard that podcast episode actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that'd be a good one for you to check out, just if you're looking for more inspiration or a different way to do things. I think his website's like pianoin21days.com or just
Yeah, he's got his funnel down. Like he
oh my
spends
god,
Yeah.
a couple hours a day on like odds and ends, but I know that he was that course is like 3 years old, 4 years old, maybe. I think it's probably 3 years old.
I think he's easily cleared 7 figures.
Yeah, he's cleared 7 figures on it.
Yeah.
It's just like,
It's crazy.
I actually spent a weekend in the mountains with him recently, and he is every bit as intelligent as.
oh yeah, he's a really smart guy, real sharp. That's really. I love that you're doing this, Louis, and I really love that you're pushing the bounds. It feels like you're always trying new things, which I deeply appreciate because that's kind of my thing too. I love trying new things. I realized the other day I'm actually, to a detriment, a little bit too much of a tinkerer. Like I see things like, ooh, I should try that. That looks like I'm like stand-up comedy. That looks like fun. I like making people laugh. I should go try that. I'm like, wait. That's not, no, I'm not going to sell out Madison Square Garden. Let's cut that off. That's not going to help me get where I want to go. There are other things that I need to dive into that are more aligned with my talents and skills. So that's really cool. What are some things you're not good at? Like, what's the first thing you outsource when you're starting something?
That's funny. So just on that topic, it's not going to be very, very useful or relevant to this, but what I realized the other day, I posted this, I think maybe on Indie Hackers, not on Twitter, was something that I used to think I was good at and realized recently that I'm actually really bad at is hiring. So I used to think I was really good at hiring people, and it turns out I'm not very good at hiring people at all. Like finding the right people and convincing them to come on board and getting them set up.
How do you go on?
Sorry, no.
I was gonna ask, like, how do you think you're bad at it? Like, what do you think you're missing?
Experience, to be honest. I think that's just something you learn how to do, and I just haven't had enough experience doing that yet. I mean, I've hired maybe 25 people, but didn't do a very good job of it. I mean, there were some great people in there, but that was luck more than
Do you think
more than skill.
Do you think that you got better at finding those great people? Like, were there more great people in numbers 20 to 25 than there were 1 to 5? That makes sense. Like, have you seen progress?
Well, they were yes. So I could definitely find better people now. I think I know what I'm looking for because I'm better now. So I know what a good person looks like more now, I think. Definitely on the marketing and the sales and the technical side, at least. And I also think that just because maybe I know more people, I'm more active online now, so I have access to better people. Like they'll take me more seriously. If that makes sense.
It's kind of a snowball, right? Like you get better at it, but you get better people, and you get better at
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that was fine. Sorry.
No, you're good. What are some things you wish that you had known when you started out, like your career, that you know now?
So I think, I mean, I've made pretty much every mistake you can possibly make when it comes to founding a company, I would say. I think one that I personally really struggled with is I really wanted to live in, and I see this all the time, especially with technical founders, is they decide the world is how they'd like the world to be. So they decide marketing pop-ups, for example, on websites like exit intent pop-ups, they don't work because I don't want them to work. And they just decide they don't work because of that. And I've done the same thing with kind of networking and meeting people. I've always wanted to be one of those kind of people who's useful and who people want to reach out to because I'm really good at something. So I always thought, well, if I just get really good at something, people reach out to me and I will kind of grow my network that way, versus other people I know who don't really have that much substance to them but are really well connected. And I kind of realized, even if you are good at something, you do still have to put effort in and, show an interest in people and get to know them and just put yourself out there. So that's definitely something I've kind of realized and got a lot better at. I'd say that's probably the main one. Yeah.
Seems to be a recurring theme that what you've got better at is relationships, right? Hiring, connecting.
Well, there was only one way it could go, to be honest.
Yeah.
Starting at zero.
Yeah. Other than that, I think there's a big thing that I've noticed that a lot of the founders in the Sales for Founders course make this mistake as well. And again, it does come back very often to focusing on an idea. Well, so a lot of people make this mistake when they start their business of like having an idea and trying to find some kind of market or a customer for that idea, right? And they tend to fail. And then the advice that most people get given is, which is the kind of the advice that I used to take as well, is go and find a problem and solve that problem. And especially developers, we love solving problems because it has clearly defined bounds and you can tinker with it and you can go away and think about how to solve it. And it's like coding, it's amazing. But people don't actually pay you to solve problems. They pay you to make their life better, to provide value to them in some way. So when you focus on a problem, you're not actually focusing necessarily on kind of what that person really cares about. You're just focusing on the way they talk about that, right? It's like going to the doctor because your knee hurts and the doctor giving you some painkillers. It takes the problem away, but it takes how you don't notice the problem anymore, but it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the pain. And that's kind of what I've noticed, is that I just always need to be talking to customers and to be way more proactive in reaching out to people and understanding what they need, rather than tinkering and thinking and doing that kind of stuff, which feels like fun and feels like work, but actually doesn't really get you that far.
That's a good point.
I can vouch for that. Well, Nick, I know your time is running low. Do you want to ask your favorite question?
Yeah, I will. So I always like to ask this towards the end, Louis. If there was one thing that you learned, like one philosophical thing or anything, big lesson that you've learned over the past couple of years of this that you wanted to leave people with, what would it be?
So, sorry, there's some really loud background noise. Okay, so the one thing that this is actually something that I've recently started thinking about and noticed more and more that it's really useful, is before you start, make sure you know exactly what kind of business you're trying to build. And I didn't do a very good job of this a couple of times and ended up building reasonably successful businesses that I didn't want to be in. And I think the moment I noticed or realized this was when I was talking to a guy called Ben Tossell, who maybe you guys know or have heard of. He runs MakerPad, which is doing really well. And he started off doing this basically almost a year ago now. And he would help solve this problem, would make some money, and would then kind of realize he wasn't running the business he wanted to be running. It wouldn't fit in with his lifestyle. So he shut it down and tried to build it up in a different way. And then he did that 3 or 4 times before he kind of found this kind of lifestyle founder fit that worked for him. And then all of a sudden it really took off because he was building a business that, didn't mean he had to hire people, didn't mean he had to be on call 24/7, meant he could go away for a week and, leave his laptop, that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people don't take enough time at the beginning to really think about where this business is going to fit into their life. Because at the end of the day, you're building something which should make you happy, right? Should let you lead the life you want to live.
Yeah, it's a dream.
Yeah. So I think people not thinking enough about that at the beginning and having kind of this series of almost bullet points to check what you're doing against. That's something that I've noticed that I would leave people with, to say, make sure you're doing that.
Yeah,
the early stages.
I think it was a big point there, saying that he once he found the fit, it just took off because he wasn't procrastinating anymore. He wasn't like avoiding things,
Yeah, no, he has a graph. I don't know if he still has it up on Twitter, but it's really amazing of his revenue where it goes from 0 to about 5K 0, 5K, 0, 5K, and then up to like 50. And it's not because he didn't have product market fit at any point. It's just because he realized that 5K, like, I don't want to do this at 10K. I don't want to do this at 20K. This doesn't scale the way I want it to. So he'd shut it down and try and solve it in a different way. And I think, he's a really clever guy, and it took him maybe 3 or 6 months to kind of really find the right fit. But if you can try and shorten that down, that's really amazing. That's 6 months you don't have to spend kind of going back to square one.
Definitely.
So yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Where can people find you online?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Louis Nicholls and then an underscore. If you're interested in learning how to do sales, learning how to find your first customers, build a profitable business, then check out the Sales for Founders course. You can get on the early bird list. If you shoot me an email, I'll reach out and help you with whatever you're working on and give you some feedback. I do that for anyone who reaches out. And those are probably the best 2 places to go and find me right now.
Awesome.
Right on.
That's great.
In, Louis.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on. I'm glad we didn't have any fireworks going off, but hope you get to enjoy this, the holiday over there today.
Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't end on the fireworks.
Right.
Oh, well.
Throw a match out the window and see what happens.
Perfect.
Thanks. This was really useful. It's really exciting. And it was great to do. Thanks a lot.
Glad to have you on.
Yeah, man.
Become unemployable.